Hey everyone, welcome to the first lecture of Chapter 6, and today we're talking about the imperfect and future tense and active, imperfect and future active for first and second conjugation. Okay, so let's start with the imperfect tense. Okay, the imperfect tense is a past tense. It's generally translated as was or were. Could also be simple past. So for instance, the simple past of love is loved, or the simple past of teach is taught. Okay, so whatever the past tense of the verb is could be imperfect tense. And the imperfect tense uses the letters BA as the tense sign. Okay, so those are the basic things that we need to know about the imperfect tense. Now I'm going to set up a chart and we're going to actually conjugate an imperfect tense verb. So I'm going to set up first, second, and third person. And at the top here, singular and plural. And let's use the verb woko as our example. So woko, wokare. Of course, woko means to call. And just like in the present tense, for the imperfect, we're going to take away the re from the infinitive, except this time we're going to write that all throughout the chart, starting even with the first singular. Remember that for present tense, we just took the first principal part and we put it in the first person singular spot. Now I'm going to take the stem woka and write it all throughout the chart. Okay, and now I'm going to add the tense sign for imperfect, which is BA. So every form will have the BA. And that's what tells us that this verb is an imperfect tense verb, or past tense verb. And then I'm going to add the endings, which this time are M, S, T, mus, tis, ent. Okay, so these are active endings. Now the only difference between present endings is that instead of an O here for first singular, I have an M. So instead of OST, must tis ent, it's MST, must tis ent, and that's the only change for the personal endings. Okay, and if we were to translate these forms, wokabam would be I was calling. Okay, wokabas, you were calling. Wokabat, he, she, or it was calling. Wokabamus, we were calling. Wokabatis, you all were calling. And wokabant, they were calling. Okay, and if you're really interested in where the makra go, there are makra here in the second singular over the A's, in second plural, and also in the first plural. You don't necessarily need to know those, but just in case you're curious about where they go. Okay, so that is how you conjugate and translate in the imperfect active. And if we were to take a second conjugation verb, for instance, if we were to take the verb video, video, videre, okay, we would take off the re and we would conjugate it the same way. The first person singular would be vide bomb, and then would bos, would bot, etc. The only difference between first and second, of course, is that first conjugation has an A as its stem, and second conjugation has an E as its stem, but they're conjugated in the exact same way. Okay, let's consider for a moment the verb form wo ka bam. Okay, the imperfect tense can be translated really 5 different ways in English. Okay, the basic way is to use was or were, so I was calling. But you can also use the simple past tense and say I called. Okay, in English, that would be a past tense. You could also use the helping verb did. You could say I did call, because that also indicates a past tense action in English. And there are 2 other ways to translate it. You could say I used to call, because one of the things that the imperfect tense shows is it shows incomplete or continuous action in the past. Okay, so the imperfect tense is a past tense, but one of the things that it shows in Latin is that something was continually always going on in the past. It happened over. It was habitual. You could also say habitual action in the past. This is something that English doesn't really distinguish quite specifically. Okay, and the final way that you can translate the imperfect is you could say I kept on calling. That is, I continually did it in the past over and over again. So think of somebody who has a habit that they always continue to do, but they used to do it in the past as well. The imperfect tense can show that idea in Latin. Okay, but usually when we translate imperfect tense verbs, we're going to stick to the first 2. We're going to say I was calling or I called. Sometimes we'll say I did call. These 2 we will rarely translate the imperfect in this way. We'll rarely say used to or kept on, but you should be aware that that's a possibility. Okay, let's look at now future tense. Okay, so remember, active refers to active or passive. We're just dealing with active today. We're not talking about passive for imperfect, but you can use the imperfect and the passive and the future and the passive. But again, we're only focusing on active. So future tense. Future tense obviously shows future action. Okay, it's translated with the English helping verbs will or shall, and you can use these interchangeably. You could say I will love or I shall love. Okay, and it uses the tense signs BO, BI, and BU. Okay, so let's do an example of a future tense verb now. So I'm going to set up my chart with first, second, and third person, and singular and plural for my number. Okay, and this time for our verb, let's use clamo. So clamo, clamare. Remember that clamo means to shout. So just like for the imperfect verb, we're going to take away the RE to get the stem. So clama will be my stem, and I will write clama throughout the chart. Okay, and now I'm going to add the tense signs, which are BO, BI, BU. Okay, so first we'll start with BO for first person, singular, and then it goes to bi, and then it's bi all the way through the rest of the chart until we get to third plural, then it's bu. So think of the bo and the bu making a sandwich with the bi in between. Okay, and then we're going to add our endings. We already have our o for first person singular. Okay, then s, t, mus, tis, ent. Okay, so clamabo would be translated as I will shout. Or you could say I shall shout, but we generally tend to not use shall as much in English in colloquial, 21st century dialogue. Okay, so clamabis, you will shout. Okay, clamabit, he, she, or it will shout. Clamabimus, we will shout. Okay, clamabitis, you all will shout. And clamabunt, they will shout. Okay, and that's how you conjugate in the future. And if you were to use a second conjugation verb, for instance, like dokeo, dokeo, dokere, which means to teach, just like in first conjugation and just like imperfect, you would take off the re to get the stem, and then you would add the appropriate endings. Bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, bunt, or you could think of it as bo, bi, bu, and then the personal endings ost, mus, tis, ent. So the first singular for dokeo in the future would be dokebo, and that would mean I will teach. Okay, everyone, and thanks for tuning in, and looking forward to seeing you guys again next time.